Yeah, I'm a businessman from Bloomington, Illinois. I graduated from Illinois Wesleyan. Have had the privilege of seeing businesses, good times and bad. Was started with some of the difficulties in the real estate industry my father had, rebuilt the business, know what it's like when the economy shoots craps and how difficult some of those businesses. Oh, thanks. Thanks. Oh my gosh. I hope these aren't worth more than $25. Thanks. Perfect. But combined with that experience, I've had the opportunity to serve in the legislature. And I know how badly, and I've served with governors who've gotten things done and governors who failed to get things done. Governors who've represented, I think, all the interests of the state of Illinois, and governors who've represented one corner of the state. And I know how important a governor can be to a state, particularly Illinois. And I'm running because I think my leadership in the Senate, experience combined with my experiences in business, and my geographical appreciation of the entire state put me in the best position to lead this state into the next decade. And we need someone like that. So there's a whole host of issues that need to be tackled. Illinois is certainly at the bottom rung of states when it comes to economic performance. My focus is economic performance. I've laid out an agenda that starts with our state's fiscal stability, brings certain workplace reforms so businesses not only have confidence in our state's fiscal condition, but workplace reforms that they know they've got a friendly state to operate in and one they can be competitive with a level playing field. Broad educational reforms so businesses know they've got a steady, skilled workforce to depend on. And lastly, ethical reforms so businesses don't fret about pay-to-play politics, corruption, clouding, and the things that are there. So we can get into the details of those things that are important, many of which you've heard me already talk about on the campaign trail. I also believe that it's going to be very difficult to beat Pat Quinn, and that I'm the best suited, if not the only one, who can take him on in the general election. A state that's 40% Democrat, 30% Republican. I think we need, if at the least, a balance of power in a different direction to the governor's office. And in spite of the positives the other candidates in the Republican field have, we've got the groundwork and the framework and the experience having run against him to build upon that no one else can.
Yesterday you were quoted, you were speaking about unemployment benefits and cutting them to motivate people to go back to work. Could you elaborate on that some more for us?
Illinois has the 15th highest reimbursement, and much higher than surrounding states, and it has the 9th longest term. As my comments reported, I must say that they were insensitive, but my comments were simply reflecting discussions I've had with businesses around the state who've said it's been one of their biggest challenges, particularly in the manufacturing skilled area. It's been difficult to get people motivated to come back. They've tried to hire people back, and for various reasons they haven't been able to get them to come back.
How is, if it's ninth longest term, what is that term? How many weeks do we pay, do you know?
Well, it's been up to 3 years under past federal increases. I didn't bring those statistics with me, but I'd be happy to provide you with them.
Okay, and when you said it was, the way it was reported, it was insensitive, do you think it was insensitive?
I think it was insensitive that I didn't take into consideration there are a number of people out there looking for jobs who don't want to be on unemployment, want to be. I don't think, I know it was insensitive because there are a number of people out there. I was talking to a group of manufacturers who, some of which in the group had said this to me along different travels in the state, and that we need to take care of people who are dealing with the difficulty of job displacement and help them get onto a path, but we have to make sure they continue to be motivated to find gainful employment.
Is there a number of weeks that you think should be used, or the optimal?
I was responding to a question, and the relation I had in traveling, I would have to look, but I think the best thing we can do on a whole host of issues is look at particularly neighboring states and all states and see what other states are providing to be that backstop or that support level for people who are going through transitional employment, but making sure that they're motivated and help them find gainful employment.
And what about, you said that our level is one of the highest too, the level of payment for unemployment.
I think it's, and again, I didn't bring the data with me that I had yesterday, but I think we're the 15th, I'm pretty sure, it could be flipped, but and I'll give you this. Dan will get the delivered. I think we're the 15th highest, and we're the 9th longest in terms of term. And it frankly was one of the big challenges. As an employer, employers have to make up for the shortfall in the unemployment trust fund. It reached billions of dollars, and that means our tax is also higher. So it's a disincentive for employers to be in business in Illinois, and it's on the other end of the scale, it's needs to be as motivational as possible to help that transitional worker, to give them the motivation to get into the workforce. But I will say that requoting that statement was insensitive to the many people who are looking for it.
Are you saying, though, that the level of payment should also come down?
I think we need to, yes, I think we need to look at, by coming down, I think we need to look at what motivates, making sure that level doesn't prohibit the motivation we need for people to get back into the workforce. Again, I said we need to look at all surrounding states, compare ourselves to that in all 50 states.
Okay, well,
but whether or not that should come down, I think the term of the length of service when it was up to 3 years was certainly not motivational, is what it could be.
Okay, you first said, yes, bring it down, and then so are you saying it should come down or it might need to come down?
I think we need to look more in detail at the surrounding states and the others.
Okay.
But is 15th highest out of line for a large industrial state?
Well, I think, again, I think we need a comprehensive study, as I said yesterday, or we need a comprehensive study looking at what that is. I mean, billions of dollars of unfunded liabilities in the trust fund and highest unemployment. You have to look at all factors that are surrounding those facts.
Given the unemployment rate in Illinois and our expanding as a manufacturing economy in the past, and the knowledge now that kids are going to college with very few job prospects beyond Far East server. If you're in the wrong profession, if you're an engineer, I guess it's different. What's your vision for where Illinois needs to go to reinvent itself to be a place where economic growth can occur, since I know economic growth is a big part of your platform?
So there's also a number of people you meet out there in the business world, be it manufacturing or otherwise, that say, and yesterday it was reported, and I hadn't seen the statistics, that thousands and thousands of jobs available, but they can't find the people who meet the skills in this state that the jobs, and I haven't seen the data, I'm just repeating what I heard yesterday, which I guess is dangerous. But I think it's anecdotal of what I've heard as well. And so I think we've got to look entirely at what economic opportunities Illinois has. Everyone needs to come through the educational system and receive a standard level of liberal arts education in all the skills. But one of the failures I think that we have as a nation, and particularly as a state, is our failure to recognize what the immediate economic job skill demands are in Illinois. So one of the reasons we have that failure is we have a Board of Education that is, in my opinion, dysfunctional in terms of who's responsible for what. And I've called for abolishing the State Board of Education. There's some savings associated with that. I think there's some local school district savings associated with that. But I also think that for my tenure, too often has there been finger pointing. Board of Education blames the governor blames the legislature, legislature blames the Board of Education, back and forth. to me, it should be a downsized department under the Office of Governor, the Chief Elected Officer of the state of Illinois, who has responsibility for implementing it from a state level. But I also believe strongly that we need to empower regional office of education through community colleges to school districts to meet the demands, economic, skill, workforce demands of communities. And without reinventing the entire wheel, I think we can manage and better utilize those regional offices, state, community colleges. My vision is that every regional office will be coterminous with a community college. In fact, in the community college, delivering services to high schools particularly, but obviously grade schools if we're going to give them authority, where at the community college level, the regional office level, and the high school and grade school level, school boards are making decisions that meet the interest of their students uniquely to that area, as opposed to some general broad-based standard that may not be consistent with workforce needs or the best interest of the child. With a goal of every student graduating from high school with either a path to a baccalaureate degree with a 2-year associate's degree, or a 2-year associate's degree with a vocational education skill that allows them to immediately enter the workforce. I think that the presumption that we've primarily been based on, that every child should go on to a 4-year baccalaureate program, is something we need to rethink. That from aptitude to interest, some students aren't destined for that and could immediately meet the workforce. So whether it be we need more people who can work in foundries or electricians or technology skills, we need to really have the motivation to empower school districts through their community colleges and others to meet those demands. So that's my vision. Now, I also have not been bashful about talking about parental choice in Chicago and how I think that can go to strengthen the public education system and give parents choice in several ways. So I'm not nearly as downstate issue as it is a Cook County issue, where we really have some of the worst performing school districts and where they closed near approximately 50 schools. I co-sponsored legislation which would have given every parent in one of those closed school districts the opportunity to have a voucher to send their child to the school of their choice, rather than, as some argued, forced to cross territorial lines and go to a district that they're unfamiliar with. The benefit is it brings competition, which I think is good for public schools. It also, because the voucher is only for the state portion, it leaves more dollars per pupil, because the property tax portion stays in the school district, to help the public institution better finance its objective.
So that was just for the kids in closed schools in Chicago, so it's specialized to that.
Before that, I also co-sponsored and helped pass out of the Senate the Meeks Bill.
Yeah,
What is referred to as the Meeks Bill.
And was that only the city of Chicago?
That was pilot
also?
programs in Chicago.
Okay, and so downstate, it's just not a big enough problem to worry about it at this point?
Well,
Push it.
we've got charter schools downstate, and I think there's a difference downstate, and I'm not at the point where I think we first need to focus on this as a pilot program in that area.
The tax going to end. The tax increase will end. I think you're all in favor of ending it. Where will that revenue come from if it does end?
Yeah. Well, the presumption that we're all in favor of ending it, I would not agree.
Well, I think you've said that. But are you in favor of
I have.
Okay.
Pat Quinn has not. Dan Rutherford has not. Kirk Dillard has not. And Bruce Ronner's he's got a study group on it. But I believe it is a key component to giving the business community confidence in Illinois and driving private sector economic activity to making sure that tax cut takes place. And I'm adamant about it. I would veto any attempt to extend it. I would veto any attempt to implement a progressive income tax, because I think they're damaging to jobs and growth. Now, the precursor to that was how do you fund it, which is why I was so adamantly for pension reform, particularly over the summer, that we had to have that. Because approximately $2 billion from a pure math standpoint, and you can argue there are other ways than just pure math, but if you just take the purest in terms of math, if that tax falls off in the first year, it's about $2 billion. Pension reforms that we passed give us about $1.3 billion in the first year. So we had to have pension reform if we're going to send the right message to give the business community confidence to protect the interest of state employees and teachers and others. And I applaud those people who had the courage to take that, the toughest vote we've ever taken. But I'm proud of my leadership in that initiative over the last couple of years, not just the summer's conference committee. And I really think we put our state on the path of the right direction. But it also, if you oppose that, I think your argument for eliminating the tax increase was even more even more difficult to have. So it was the first step in making sure that tax. But why does the tax increase need to fall off? A, we've got to give business confidence. B, we've got to keep people from leaving Illinois. We've got one of the highest corporate and individual rates. In fact, I believe we need to look at Texas and Florida and their example of no personal income tax. And in the long run, and not overnight, in the long run, I think we need to put ourselves on a path where we're not taxing personal income, but raising revenues and resources in a more beneficial and broader way in the state, as Texas and Florida have done, big states like us in the top 5, and grown their economy at the same time, stabilized their budget. So that's the path I want to put us on. Any discussion of extending that income tax is contrary to that path, and I think contrary to job creation.
Are you saying that you would put savings from the pension reform before the courts rule on it?
What I'm saying is it gives us $1.3 billion. We don't know how the courts are going to rule.
Right.
But what I'm saying is it gives us $1.3 billion in relief at the same time as the tax falls off, which gives us an argument to do that. How this budget comes together remains to be seen.
Okay, but I mean, it's unlikely the Supreme Court's going to rule on this case by the time the tax rolls back.
My presumptions today are based on this tax being this pension reform taking place, and that until we know what the Supreme Court does, that's the basis of my economic model. I believe the $1.3 billion will be there, regardless of the short-term action of the court.
Isn't that risky?
Depends on how you would use the $1.3 billion.
How would you use the $1.3 billion?
Well, if you use it to let the tax fall off.
When you talk about eventually,
I mean, not if you. That's how I'd use it.
okay, if you talk about eventually going to like a Texas or Florida, of course, Texas has a lot of oil, and Florida, I don't know, I think they have more tourism than us. Aren't you talking about another giant hole in? I mean, how long are you projecting that it would take to get to the point where we don't have a personal income tax?
I think it could take 10 years or more.
And how does that happen?
Well, I think what you do is you put in places government spending limitations like TABOR, Tax Accountability Initiative that happened in Colorado, that says government spending can't exceed a rate of population growth combined with inflation. And as we rebuild our economy and bring the 200,000 jobs we've actually lost in the last 5 years, and the 200,000 I think we've lost in terms of opportunity, as we rebuild that economy by giving the business community and the consumer confidence, workplace reforms, education, job place, skilled labor reforms, and ethic reforms, we will rebuild that economy. I would not be satisfied with a goal of any less than 400,000 jobs over the first 4 years of our administration. That has a pretty good bottom line effect to the budget, billions of dollars, because of the reduction in government demand for services, government services, and the increased income. As I've often said, there is no solution that's solely cutting our way out of this problem or taxing our way out of this problem. There's revenue solutions which don't include tax increases and are based on economic activity that creates more tax revenue. And there are cutting solutions, but you've got to have a vision for both. And we are, I think, in terms of, you talk about tourism, we can and do, we have a good tourism industry. We can have a better tourism industry. And in terms of oil, we've got a lot of energy resources in the state.
Are you all on board with the fracking thing?
Yes. As governor, I want to move expeditiously to implement the positive economic opportunities that are not only directly associated with the construction jobs and the permanent jobs associated with harvesting those energy resources, but also what I think can be a revitalization to manufacturing. We've already we're already the transportation hub of this nation in terms of economic position. You couple that with potentially, and I don't think potentially, more than potentially, the realization that we can be energy independent and low cost, means that we can revitalize the manufacturing industry in this nation right here in Illinois.
Did I also see that you talked about expanding to services, sales tax to services?
I didn't talk about, and I know what you're referring to. Mm-hmm. I was very clear yesterday that, but evidently not clear enough.
Mm-hmm. Tell us.
Before we even consider expanding taxes to services, and anybody who's governor's got to be open to discussion, but my discussion yesterday was about collecting the tax revenue that we're already due.
Are you talking about internet sales?
Which is why I supported what was called the Amazon tax. And as governor of the state, I'll work to make sure we can do that. We know that, and it's not necessarily just internet sales, but that's probably the best way to define it. But we know that businesses in Illinois that have bricks and mortar, pay property taxes and payroll taxes, and sell goods have to collect the applicable sales tax that the consumer is responsible for. And they're paying payroll and property and other taxes, while businesses that are not paying payroll and property and other taxes in Illinois get a free ride in terms of the collection process. And that creates hardship and an unlevel playing field for businesses that are paying property and income, payroll taxes and so forth. And we need to make sure that, and in today's era of technology, there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't be able to do that. They did, but it doesn't mean you give up on it.
Okay, no, I just wanted to clarify that.
And
I don't know if they rule permanently against it, but I know it hasn't taken effect. The law we passed.
And so you're saying enforce that law, collect that tax if it's available. And would there be an eventual openness to taxing services, or?
As a student of economics and tax policy, I believe that we have to realize that any way we can lower rates so people aren't making a decision contrary to your state or community because of tax rates, any way we can lower those rates to make them less a factor is important. If that means broadening the base, I'm open to that discussion.
Okay. And by the way, just with the fall off of revenue that would happen right away, because you're not going to get the kind of influx of economic activity right away to replace perhaps the tax that diminishes. How, what do you cut? I know you're probably going to go to Medicaid, but is that the main thing, or are there other things?
Well, I think Medicaid. So if you take the $2 billion to $2.1 billion, and you presume that you're going to have $1.3 billion in pensions, that leaves you, from a math standpoint, $800 million. And you presume that between some reforms in Medicaid, eligibility requirements, and other things, you could save another, and if Governor Quinn's administration is successful at getting the waivers they're looking at, it could handle the whole problem. I'm taking them at their word that they're going to get those Medicaid waivers that they've applied for, although I can't speak to them in detail. I only know that they're hinging much of their solution on that. At the end of the day, my policy will be simple. Meet the pension obligation. pay down the backlog of unpaid bills over 4 years to a reasonable cycle. What's left, we have to reprioritize with the legislature. And I will have to say this. I give some credit to the way in which the legislatures handled the budgetary process over the last couple of years. They've come up for the first time, not for the first time, but the legislature, typically it was governors who demanded this, but the legislature has come up with a number that they mathematically had to meet. The fault, I think, has been that the administration hasn't managed the budget within its confines. And I think if you combine a legislature with the discipline to live within a reasonable projected income level, meeting the pension payments, a program to pay down the backlog of unpaid bills, even the Democratic-controlled legislature in a bipartisan way can be motivated to ration the remaining money to meet our highest priorities, and have motivation because of that to provide some reforms and some other things in terms of Medicaid and other programs that will work. But at the end of the day, we got to stop spending more money than we have, because the first key to rebuilding the state's economy, and if we don't rebuild the state's economy, there is no solution. And the first key has got to be financial stability, which is why pension reform was so important.
I have a couple of fracking questions, if you don't mind if we jump back to fracking for a moment.
Would I drink the water?
Well, there's one. How
did.
confident are you in the regulations that have been established?
You know, as you well know, you pass a law that you think you're comfortable with, and then you have to look at what the administration comes up, and then it's going through JCAR right now. So then the implementation about its actual regulations by the administration. I think we need to move forward with caution in both ways. I'm very comfortable that we signed a bill that has the framework of being very environmentally conscious. Sierra Club, I believe, embraced the legislation. A lot of environmental interest groups. So on that side, I'm comfortable. I'm not as comfortable under the Quinn administration that we will work with businesses to implement clean and safe and environmentally conscious fracking in an expeditious way that will benefit the people of Illinois, particularly Southern Illinois.
Do you think they're going to try to regulate too much, or?
Well, I think we're all worried about that. If you hear about that in almost any business that does business with the state of Illinois, there are constant complaints about the lack of cooperation. And as governor, I'll make sure that my administrators, from the cabinet level down, are first and foremost going to protect the interest of the state of Illinois, but work with, not against, people who want to make a capital investment in our state and employ people.
There are concerns about how some of these rural, struggling communities are going to cope with the infrastructure needs that fracking is going to require.
Yeah.
Is there a way that Illinois can help those communities?
Well, you're getting into another area that's critically important, and that is all of Illinois' infrastructure. And we need to, as I've long said, the prospect of governors coming into office and passing a big bonding bill that spends a whole lot of money over 4 to 7 years and then going dry for 4 to 7 years is wrong. The problems that creates is when you throw that much money into an economy, you don't get the biggest bang for your dollar. So supply and demand create an environment where you may be only getting 80% of the actual goods and services that you would get in a normalized economy. The other problem with that is that when you spend all that money so quickly and then you don't have any money to spend later, a lot of the people who entered that workforce to provide those goods and services for you now are looking for a job, they're unemployed, and now they go on the unemployment rolls as opposed to in the economy. So just as you probably depreciate the roof on your building over a life cycle, and and set money aside to be able to pay for that when that comes due, the state of Illinois needs to look at its entire infrastructure, and I'll complete a study that will say what we need to do over the next 30 years. And it'll be based on level funding adjusted for inflation. And it'll be based by region, so that, you know, we're having level funding in regions where the workforce is, and we're meeting the demands so that we are fully up to scale in a 30-year cycle. And the key is how do you come up with the revenues? Well, one of the ways you may come up with the revenues is to capture the sales tax that people are supposed to be paying right now. I think there's also advantages, as I've said it, by eliminating the double tax on gas and creating a more competitive gas price that will do that.
That's to take the sales tax off?
Yes, but then it also means adjusting the base tax on petroleum products that keeps us competitive and is inflationary. You couple that with, I completed an audit through the audit commission that proved that Governor Quinn was doing what we were afraid of, and that was, in that particular year, he spent less than half of the road money actually on roads and construction. Now, this whole plan has to be combined with the best estimate of what the federal dollars will be coming into Illinois, and then we've got to have a permanent funding source. I'm not saying that all adds up, but I am saying when you double tax and it's uncompetitive, it probably loses us some money, whether it be because they're driving across the border, not just buying gas, but buying cigarettes and buying beverages or whatever that may be. But I am committed to a comprehensive 30-year plan with level funding, inflation adjusted, because I think it's more consistent with what we need as a state. I also believe that in the area of new roads, particularly the Ileana and 53, we need to fully examine and support the concept of private-public partnerships and tolling and otherwise for those. It works. I mean, I don't find many complaints, frankly, about the toll road system in Illinois. It works, it's maintained, and I think that's the best way to expand.
But that's not private at this point. Going private would be a new thing.
Public-private partnerships in toll roads are working in Illinois. The Skyline, I would call Skyway. I would call a public-private partnership.
The Daily sold off, yeah, to the company.
You can model it better and so forth. It's got to be a win-win. Don't get me wrong. And it's really hard for me to speak to the Ileana because of the secrecy within the Department of Transportation. And I'm not saying that there's not a reason as they negotiate the deal, but I also do think that deals like that need to be confirmed by the legislature. They can be negotiated privately in the best interest, but at some point in time, once the deal's been struck, it does need more oversight than just the governor.
Okay, when you
So
talk
does the
about,
gas tax have to be changed? Does
Yeah.
that have to be increased?
you're saying with inflation it might go up some.
Well, I think, first of all, every tax has to look at what's competitive. I want to do, now, I'll confess to you today, we're competitive with Indiana, and we were not 10 years ago, because Indiana's made some dramatic differences. I don't know how we ever get competitive with Missouri. It's so low. So if you look at where they're at, but my position is that we need to look at what's competitive, and that the tax on gasoline and petroleum products should be dedicated to the road fund that probably would look at a competitive percentage tax, not a gallonage tax, and a percentage tax. Because that's more adjusted for inflation in terms of long-term sustainability. I mean, if you think about the gallonage tax, it's archaic in terms of maintaining dollar value.
A better gas mileage.
And, yeah, better gas mileage. And the fact that prices of gas have gone up so much, it doesn't take into, and that does take into consideration, because petroleum products continue to be a barometer of commodity costs in terms of infrastructure.
Okay, so you would need, it would be designed to be a single tax, but it could get more money over time. Could be higher.
I think and I think by being more competitive, we could get more money over time to other state funds. You know, cigarettes and beverages and property taxes that go to schools and payroll taxes.
A political question. I know that you run as a good conservative, which is very good for your base. I also know that some of the analysis of why you lost that very close race to Pat Quinn last time was the abortion issue, for example, in the suburbs. So I'm just wondering, if you redo this, Illinois is kind of a blue state. Don't you still have the problem of, by being who you are and believing what you believe? Can you win a statewide race? Being as pro-life as you are, for example.
Yeah. Well, let me just say that the last election, Pat Quinn was in a honeymoon. I'd say this if he were sitting here. He's a populist demagogue who ran in a 40% Democrat state, 30% Republican, who, if you ask people that were with him in the last election, they'd use a worse word than this, but to put it mildly, he deceived them. And there's not a trust factor amongst...
Is that because of the 1% to 2% tax increase?
It's because of that. It's because of the way he's dealt with union contracts, negotiations, the way he's hammered down closures of facilities. There's a whole host of reasons, and probably the biggest is his deception on pension reform. He ran on a platform that he wouldn't change the tier 1 system, and yet and they would use a lot uglier words than deception. So there's a recent poll, whether you believe in their technology or methodology or not, show that I beat Pat Quinn by 10 points.
Was that we asked America?
I think so. We believe our strength is even better than that. I don't think many of the unions can go out and ask their members to endorse Pat Quinn.
What would they go for you instead? I mean, you've flirted with right to work in the past, and
I don't think there's any question that they would go with me. Anecdotally, as I travel around, and then when I've talked to their leaders, they can't go back to their members and ask them to support Pat Quinn. Now, you brought up an issue, a social issue. I'm pro-life. I'm personally pro-life. You know that. And, I'm not going to change. I will tell you that I believe I made a very tactical error on that issue, and that was I was so focused on economic issues that I didn't allow myself to get drug into those discussions, and I let them label me, and I will not let that happen this time. And I'll just, Bill Brady is going to eliminate a woman's right to choose, even in the case of rape and incest. Well, those are my personal. I believe that abortion is wrong. I believe that we have an obligation to protect life as human beings. But the fact of the matter is, no governor in this country can eliminate a woman's right to choose in at least the first couple dozen weeks, and certainly not in the case of abortion and incest. So we won't.
You mean rape, but that's fine.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Rape and incest. Yeah. We will not allow them. I will not allow them to use those kind of scare tactics to identify me this time. I've learned from that experience.
Okay, I think you said yesterday that if, I don't know if it's going to happen, if a repeal of same-sex marriage were to come forward, you would sign it?
What I said was, it was with the Tribune's editorial board, and they were hammering home on this, and I said, it's not going to happen. I mean, it's a hypothetical, but my position hasn't changed. I believe marriage is an institution, traditional institution between a man and woman. We have civil unions, and if it came to my desk, which is highly impossible, as I think we'd all agree, but yes, my position hasn't changed. I would be consistent.
We have just a couple minutes left, and I'm sorry, do you mind if I jump in?
Please do.
A couple issues that are of local interest. One being the executive mansion. If you're elected, would you be living in Springfield?
Yeah, and I think a key component there is, when I had a child who was in high school, I not only committed to living there, but I think the truth is, if you're going to be committed to living there, you'd have to send your children to school there. So I think that's what the Edgars did. I think that shows. I mean, Pat Quinn's definition that his underwear is there, and therefore he's a resident, is baloney. But no, I'm from Central Illinois. As a business person and as a state senator, I know if you're going to run state government, you got to be where it is. And living in the executive mansion's a priority. And not only that, if I had children, my children would go to Springfield schools.
The Illinois State Fair, do you believe Illinois should be in the business of hosting a fair?
Yes.
Okay. Your thoughts on having 2 fairs in Illinois?
You know, I think we've got to do everything possible to make the fairs self-sustainable. So there's no reason not to have 2 fairs, but I think we've got to look at every penny and make sure we're conscious about how resources are being spent. I mean, if you think about events, you know, the facilities themselves are paid for, and as a business to reinvest in it, there ought to be a way those can be self-sustainable. And as governor, I want to see them not be a burden on taxpayers. But I do think it's important that we celebrate agriculture. We are the most profound agricultural nation in the state and the nation, and it's important that we support that industry. And the State Fair does more than just support and celebrate agriculture, and it should do more.
Do you believe the amount of state governments that is headquartered in Chicago is appropriate? Do you think more of it should be down Springfield?
I'm not going to tell you more should be in Chicago. And I wouldn't tell the Chicago Tribune that either. I think both Governors Blagojevich and Quinn have done a great disservice by relocating outside of where the state capital is. And my focus would be on state jobs. Now, does that mean we need there shouldn't be any government services in Chicago? No. Do we need a Thompson Center? No.
A Thompson Center?
Yeah.
You would close the Thompson
I
Center?
didn't say that, but we don't need that much facility.
So would you rent some of it out?
Yeah.
And move more people to Springfield?
I don't know that you even need to move more people to Springfield, but yes, I think we need to look at locating state employees in the state capital. And I don't know that the state of Illinois needs to own the Thompson Center, but that's a bigger discussion.
So you might say, Blagojevich wanted to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to sell it too?
We need to always evaluate all of our real estate holdings and see if they're necessary. And I would say this: if the Thompson Center if the state of Illinois could meet its real estate needs in Chicago more efficiently by leasing space in the Thompson Center, whatever, I think we'd look at that.
Interesting. Bruce Rauner is spending a bunch of money. How does that skew the race? Do you have any thoughts about his impact on this?
Bernie, if he wasn't spending a bunch of money, he wouldn't be recognized in the polls. He's spending millions of dollars to buy name ID. He's got very little message, but he's got a lot of name ID. This is essentially a guy who is tied to the Chicago Democratic machine, who's trying to portray himself as something he's not been, and he's got enough money to do that. But at the end of the day, I think the voters will come back to home and realize that if we're going to win this race, we need a proven Republican with a trusted and experienced background, and that's what my candidacy is all about.
And this Mid-America Fund ad that is pretty effective, showing just you other three with 60 years of Springfield experience. Do you know who's funding that?
No, we're trying to find out. He won't discuss it. I mean, it's the same hoax that Aaron Schock went through. Senator Treasurer Rutherford's got allegations against Bruce Rauner. Aaron Schock's got allegations against Bruce Rauner. There's just too much smoke not to believe there's something there.
Are you making allegations yourself here?
I'm not at this point. We're trying to figure out exactly who's behind it. But I think it does, lack of transparency and lack of disclosure begs the question about how we deal with this in the future.
You have, I believe I read you sought a concealed carry permit, is that correct?
No, I don't. I was asked if I would get one, and I was the only one who said he would.
Okay.
Governor's elections kept me, 2 days in a classroom might be difficult.
You were a gun owner though, I assume, or no? Are you?
I'm not telling you. I have an FOID card.
Okay.
But I'm not disclosing whether or not I own guns.
Any thoughts on?
No, I own guns.
Any thoughts on Senator Rutherford's situation, or should anybody in this race get out of this race?
You know, it's bizarre. What happened last Friday was just terribly bizarre, and I certainly understand Dan's pointing the finger at Bruce Rauner, given the circumstances of this election and what recently came out in the Sun-Times about Dan's travel and other things that everyone says he was the feed to the Sun-Times about the travel. I don't know if it's true or not, but I understand Dan's, I don't know how to word it, but I understand. At the end of the day, though, these are some pretty serious allegations, and Dan's got to deal with them. And it's a terrible distraction, though. I mean, most people will tell you it helps me because Dan and I are both downstaters, and further solidifies our belief that this is a two-person race because Bruce Rauner has so much money. But it's a terrible distraction, and just as, you know, a terrible distraction was Bruce Rauner's position on the minimum wage. I can't tell you how much time I had to spend, or Claudine Payton, as you well reported. But it's those are things you deal with in campaigns, and you have to deal with them as they come. I hope it gets resolved quickly for everyone's interest.
And I know, is it foreclosures or lawsuits about your business, some of your businesses?
Well, it's not my businesses. I have 5 real estate marketing companies, a title company, a property management and a restoration company, and a property maintenance company. And those have always, even though they were challenged by the economic downturn, the difficulties that some of my real estate investments have is when you're a developer and property values in a period of 12 months lose, in some cases, 3/4 of their value because of the state's economy. We've been going through a process of working out and liquidating those interests.